You're listening to the podcast for all of the news, notes, and breakdowns for your Ohio State Buckeyes. This is Sons of the Shoe with Nick Wilson and Spencer German.
Sons of the Shoe is back. Nick Wilson, Spencer German. Hi there. Hello there. How are you there, Buckeye Nation? As always, we start the show begging. Please make sure to follow the show, Sons of the Shoe, wherever you get your podcast, Apple, Spotify, 923thefan.com, the free Odyssey app, wherever you get your podcasts. And make sure to follow us on 923 The Fan's YouTube channel. Just search 923 The Fan in the search bar there, and we are under the podcast link, under the playlist link. And make sure to like our videos. Please make sure to interact as well. We love to hear from you guys. And as we get started, hi, Spencer. How you doing, buddy? Your audio's off there, fella.
Yeah, I know. I caught myself like two words in. I'm in that mode right now, Nick, what I was trying to say before I realized I was muted. I'm in that mode where you're gone for a week and you're sort of trying to get back in the swing of things, and it's a lot harder than you thought it was going to be because you had like a nice routine going, and then you're like, oh shit, I lost this for 1 week that I was gone. So yeah, that's kind of where I'm at, which is, a part of it's football season's finally here. And I'm gonna be honest, like I thought at the time, I was like, oh, this is going to be great. Take my vacation the week before the NFL season gets going. College football starts, but it's just, Ohio State Akron that I'm missing. Nothing, there's not going to be like a ton of craziness that happens out of that game. We know how that game's going to go. And now I came back and I'm like, oh, I have no motivation to actually get back into the swing of things covering the NFL and football like I should be. So here we are.
I got to say, the older I get, the better I am at actually relaxing on vacation. The catch-22 of that is coming off vacation gets harder and harder and harder every time that you do it. Yeah. I can only imagine where I'm going to be in another 20 years of working. So it's interesting you say the Akron thing. So Ohio State did end up blowing them out. They didn't quite cover. They only beat them by, I believe, what was it? Was it 46 points, somewhere in there? Instead of the 50.5 points that I think everybody thought it was. But I thought it was really interesting to watch social media during the game because you would have thought that they had a realistic chance of losing to Akron in the first half of the season by the way people were talking about that game. And I'll be honest with you, I think they were one or two plays away from this game being a blowout at the half. I just don't know that anybody else in Ohio State Nation would agree with me.
Yeah, I'm curious your thoughts on this as a whole too, because again, being that I was out of town, my consumption of the game was going back afterwards, rewatching sort of the full game highlights, how things played out. And you don't get the full context of how the game kind of played out with just the highlights. So I'm seeing Will Howard make some really nice throws, and I'm like, oh damn, like he looked good to me. But then you realize, like, after the first quarter, they're only up 7-3. And then after the half, they're only up 17-3. And my initial thought, Nick, truly was like, if this is how this game went, there's no way Ohio State fans weren't like clamoring on social media for Ryan Day to be fired. Because that was where my head went first. Because I know how this fan base is. And it just seemed like, oh my God, they're only up 7-3 on Akron after a quarter. How the hell were people not losing their minds? And since I've now returned and talked to some people about the game and sort of their thoughts on it and gotten more of a pulse on the fan base in real, like how they were feeling in real time, it sounds like people weren't really that panicked, I guess. And they were actually just kind of treating it as like, well, first game with this new offensive coordinator, new sort of style of offense in some respects, because it's Chip Kelly doing it versus Ryan Day, new quarterback. A lot of new pieces, Jeremiah Smith being out there, offensive line kind of getting their feet back underneath them. So a lot of people, it seemed like, chalked it up to just like first game. I don't even want to say jitters, but just like first game sort of, ironing things out and getting sort of comfortable. And that kind of seems to be where people are saying they resided. But I don't know, like from your perspective, if that was 100% true. But I also know, like, another thing people brought up to me was that Will Howard only had, like, I think he was under 50% completion percentage at the half. And again, that was another thing that I'd say, oh, well, then people probably were freaking out about it. But then I heard people throw in the context of like, well, there were like several drop passes in the first half too, and there were some miscommunication issues and all that. So am I right in my understanding that it seems like people sort of chalked up maybe the slower start to that game to just it being the first game and kind of, start of a new season jitters, if you will?
I don't know. I think anybody that told you that. Now listen, I think media members, I do think most media members, if that's who you're talking to, were pretty relaxed about the game. Because I think you saw like the pieces starting to click together, even in that second quarter. Yeah, by the end of that, it didn't feel like they were only up 17-7. It felt like the game was over because the offense was really starting to heat up, as was the defense, by the way, and really starting to lock down. So I think from a fan perspective, all I had on any interaction, as a matter of fact, I can actually tell you. So I put my toe in the water on how people felt Will Howard was doing, because I did know that his completion percentage wasn't sexy early in that game. But I got to be honest with you. I saw that dude. I didn't see one misplaced ball that I can remember in the first half. There was a crucial drop by Jeremiah Smith that I think he knew that he had the end zone right in front of him. It would have been like a 50 or 60-yard play that I think would have changed everybody's mind about how Will Howard was doing. But my biggest issues, my biggest bugaboos, as you know, with Kyle McCord, was his lack of mobility, his inability to even kind of move around the pocket the way you need to. And then secondarily, it was just his ball placement sucked and never got better. He never really sped up his process. I thought the ball placement by Will Howard early in that game was sublime. Like, I thought it was, holy crap, I didn't see an errant throw. So I dipped my toe in the water on social media and I said, it's taken one half of football, and I can already tell you that Will Howard's a better quarterback than Kyle McCord. And my responses were, but look at it, look at the box scores. And I was like, okay. Alrighty. I think that speaks to an insecurity that I think some folks in Buckeye Nation have about Will Howard. And I think if you really truly looked at where the ball was supposed to go and the throws and his ability to move, it was night and day. Like with Will Howard, I honestly think with Kyle McCord in that exact same scenario, I don't know you get the 17 points in the first half of that game, because there were drops. The offensive line, which we got to talk about, exhibited no push. And I know Akron's defensive line has some real dudes there, so I don't want to run them down. That's the one strength of their team. But the O-line was bad. Like, the quarterback got very little help in the first half. And so for Will Howard to come out of that with 17 points, and honestly, it was just the little things. He looks like how I think the Buckeyes quarterback, the talent level is supposed to look.
Yeah, and I kind of picked up on the fact that, well, I think we've talked about it a ton, but I do think like Will Howard's ability to be mobile is going to be one of his greatest assets all season long. And that was something that Will Howard didn't have. And that did sort of reign supreme as I went back and watched kind of the recap of the game, that he was able to do that a little bit more, move in the pocket and create with his legs. And I think that's an element that Ohio State missed sorely last year. So I thought that was really good to see. But like your assessment of it, like this is kind of new information for me. Like I hadn't heard people saying that they were freaking out, but it sounds like with you just even putting out the blanket statement of like, I can tell he's already better than Kyle McCord, that people were ready to sort of pounce. And again, like I think you're right that it does speak to some sort of insecurity with this program. I think it's rooted in the disbelief in Ryan Day that seems to be pretty prevalent across the fan base. I also think though that some of it is just like, well, and I don't remember the start time of that Miami game, but as you're looking around and you're seeing other transfer quarterbacks who are doing, impressive things, and you're like, Will Howard only did this in the first half against Akron. I think that was probably, again, reason why I would expect Ohio State fans to be a little bit concerned. But all I was getting Go ahead.
The Miami game was kickoff at the same time.
Okay.
And what aided to it is that Syracuse had already played and won.
Yeah,
And
Kyle
McCord's numbers look good. We'll find out. I haven't watched the game, so I don't know if he actually looked good, but his numbers look good enough and defensible.
Well, and for Syracuse, he looked good, so that's its own thing too. But
different bar.
Yeah, exactly. But no, I mean, I think all those things were probably factored in. But and this is why I was super curious to like get the true like pulse on in real time how people were reacting to it, because I know how Ohio State fans are. But I mean, I'm not overreacting to maybe a slow start. Like you said, Jeremiah Smith dropped a pass, and you told me about that the other day, how if he catches that one pass, maybe it changes the outlook of the first half entirely, and they're up more scores, and people feel differently about it. But yeah, like I think I kind of expected it to not be perfect with Will Howard from the start, but the goal is you get to that Oregon game, and that's where he's like really clicking and rolling on all cylinders. And I think they're going to be okay in that regard.
So I will say we have to talk about Jeremiah Smith's amazing debut. I think it was 6 catches, 92 yards, 2 touchdowns. And if he makes that 7th catch, he's probably got 140 yards with a 3rd touchdown and a 7th reception. I know we've had a lot of great Buckeye receivers, almost to the point that I was trying to go back and think about everybody's individual debut and like their first game and how well they looked. And the reality is I sent myself cross-eyed. As far as I can remember, it's the greatest single debut of any Buckeyes receiver ever, because he owned that game with Emeka Ibuka on the field, with Carnell Tate on the field, with Travion Henderson and Quinshon Judkins. Like, it was as impressive, and I know it's against Akron, so I know the automatic rebuttal from anybody watching is, was just Akron. The dude looked like a different specimen as a freshman in his first game. So at least in one game, the hype completely delivered with Jeremiah Smith, and it whetted the beak and got me a little bit more excited for what that kid's going to do this year.
Yeah, the only thing, like the first game that I thought, as you were talking about this, and it's a really good sort of topic and question. The first thing that came to mind for me was JSN's performance in the Rose Bowl against Utah a couple years ago, where obviously Olave and Garrett Wilson declared for the draft, and they were like, yeah, we're not playing. And so it kind of created this opportunity for JSN to really break out. He had like 300-something yards, 340 yards, 3 touchdowns. I think, and Marvin Harrison Jr. had 3 touchdowns in that game too, for what it's worth. But I also don't think, like, technically that wasn't like their debuts. It might have been like their debuts of them like starting, but it wasn't their debut because they had played in games before. So yeah, I mean, I'd be hard pressed to find somebody who had a similar performance to that. And to your point, like if there was a couple of drops in there, or a couple of miscues in there that were, him and Will Howard maybe weren't on the same page, I can only imagine like how much better it would have been and could have been. But yeah, I mean, that dude, we've been hearing all about it, and he's clearly a certified freak. So to see how he progresses and grows throughout the season, same thing kind of applies. I just talked about like Will Howard being, ramping up and getting ready for that Oregon game, and what he looks like in that game matters the most. I think the same thing can be said about a guy like Jeremiah Smith. Like these first couple games are going to kind of be like our taste test of what of his potential, and then that Oregon game is where you're like, okay, if he can ball out in a game like this on this stage, yeah, like this dude's going to be freaking legit. And we're going to feel like that the Buckeyes once again hit the lottery at wide receiver, and they have a good one for the next several years to come, and that he's going to be a reason why they potentially go win a national championship this year.
So I also have to mention the defense looked dominant. There was a couple moments Akron had early in the game, and then Ohio State just slammed the door.
I'll say this real quick too, and this was something I picked up in the highlights, because that was another thought I had was like, man, like Akron early on in the first half and the second half, they moved the ball up and down the field a little bit, which was kind of, when you talk about how good the Ohio State defense is, it was like, that was a little bit surprising. But I want to give Joe Moorhead some credit.
Yep.
There were some really good play designs that I noticed in there where and I think when you're Akron going to play Ohio State like that, first game of the season, I think you got to do some stuff like that, because like you're a massive underdog. You don't have the talent advantage. You got to try to throw some wrinkles in. There was one play where he had like a tight end come in and like pretend he was going to take the snap and then shift to the left. And then it went to Bullock, who was that quarterback. And then the tight end ran like a little flare out to the right, caught a pass. picked up a first down on like 3rd and short. Like he did some really unique stuff. He used Bullock in a lot of different ways. So I do think like, yeah, the defense was dominant as you would kind of expect against a team like Akron, but there were some moments where Akron was able to move the ball. And I don't know that I thought I sat there and thought like, well, they're going to suck this year because they let Akron move the ball up and down the field a little bit. I think it was more so just the creativeness of Joe Moorhead, who's done it at the highest levels. And I thought he got more out of Akron in certain instances than what anybody should have expected and would have expected.
I definitely agree. There was some good pick play stuff early. That it was like little timing stuff that why the play didn't work out.
Yeah.
But like 4 weeks from now, that might have been a touchdown or at least put them deeper into the red zone. I agree with that. But listen, I don't want to belabor this because we've talked. I need to see better push this week from the offensive line. I really do. And Nunnally's a really nice player. They got another kid from Florida on the defensive line in Akron that I thought played better than I expected. But you're Ohio State. And if you can't push even a good MAC defensive line around, you're not going to win a national championship if that's the way your offensive line's going to play. And so I will say, like, the next 3 games are about, can that offensive line, I know you're getting guys back healthy. I understand that. Guys, 1 left guard shouldn't make that big a difference. Like aggressiveness, like these are not small guys either. It's not like, Justin Fry only specializes in undersized offensive linemen.
Yeah.
No. You were bigger across the board by Akron by 30, 40, 50 pounds in most instances. And I didn't see it once.
Yeah. Well,
so
and
I'm not trying to sound the alarms here, but I need the next 3 games. Like by the time you get to Oregon, if that's what your offensive line's going to do, I'll be honest, you might want to fire Justin Fry ahead of that game. And I hate to be that guy because that's very reactionary. But no, I got 3 years of this guy running jack squat O-lines out there. And at this point, it's either you're not picking the right guys, you're not developing them, or both. I need to see this offensive line look completely different over the next 3 weeks.
Well, and if it continues to be an issue, Nick, the other thing that'll happen here is, the fan base will point to, well, you went out and got all this talent in the transfer portal, but you didn't address that at all. I guess other than Seth McLaughlin. We know they got Seth McLaughlin, but it was like we knew that the tackles were a bigger issue in some instances. We knew just kind of like as you got further outside the line, like those are some of the areas people were looking at after last year as concerns. And for them to not even explore their options, and maybe they did and we just didn't know, but for them not really to pursue anything up front was kind of surprising on our end, and I think for Ohio State fans. So, yeah, like that's just going to become the narrative if those guys continue to struggle. It's like, how are you just content with this group as is and Justin Fry continuing to seemingly not be able to develop these guys when you had some options out there that you could have pursued in the transfer portal? And you clearly were in the transfer portal because you went and got a new quarterback, you went and got a new running back, but you didn't do anything really up front other than Seth McLaughlin.
Well, the 2 things I look for in an O-line, the obvious is what Michigan has done, what Georgia has done, what Alabama's done, what Ohio State offensive lines used to do is just, are you just knocking dudes off the ball, right? Like when is there that explosive factor across the line? And that's not there from Ohio State, which is okay if then I'm watching you move laterally and I'm seeing a lot of creative in your run fits, pulling, making sure you're getting guys moving, because that's an opportunity to see your athleticism.
Yeah.
But if you're soft, if you're not overly physical, and you're not outrageously athletic,
yeah,
what do you do?
Yeah. Well, and
I hate to be that guy because again, it's 1 game, and I'm trying to give them 1 game. But that was my biggest concern, as coming into this. And they didn't look mauling, nor did they look light on their feet in game 1.
Well, and that's where coaching does come into play too, which is why I think it then falls in Justin Fry's lap. And on top of that too, Nick, like we always talk about why they've lost to Michigan the last couple of years, and a lot of it being about physicality. I think that physicality, I think an offensive line sets the tone for a team being physical or not on both sides of the ball. Like if you have a really physical offensive line, the rest of the team feels that. And so I do think that's going to be sort of the challenge for this group now as they continue to navigate these next several weeks leading into that Oregon game is, can you intensify that? And can you prove to people that you're more physical and a better group than maybe people are giving them credit for right now?
All right, guys, I know we talked a little bit about Akron there, but we got another game this week, Western Michigan for the Buckeyes. We're going to talk about that game next, but quick word from our sponsors. All right, guys, another game, another week for Ohio State. This is a primetime kickoff. Why? In Columbus, it is at 7:30 kick. Western Michigan coming to Columbus. And I think you and I just started to say off air, like, I think this is a nice little step up in competition from Akron. So if last week was the preseason, this feels more like a week one to me. A team you should beat, a team that you're favored by, I want to say 38 points right now. Actually, FanDuel had it 37.5 this morning. So you should beat them, but if you mess around, you're going to find out real quick that there's some real talent on this Western Michigan team.
Well, yeah, and let's face it, they gave, I think, Wisconsin, I don't want to say a scare, but they definitely challenged them. I mean, they were only down 3 at the half. They were only down 6 after 3 quarters. So, and you're talking about a Wisconsin team that maybe is in a little bit of like a transitional period because, Luke Fickell's there and he's still kind of getting his guys, recruiting his own guys and building that roster and doing some nice things there. But I think there's I don't want to say it's like a scare and that Ohio State fans should be worried, but this is definitely a team that's going to play you really tough. That is going to be a little bit, again, as you mentioned, a step up from Akron in terms of a MAC school. They have a chance to be really competitive in the MAC this year, maybe even win the MAC. I don't know that they're the best team in the MAC, but I think they're up there in that conversation. And yeah, I mean, I think they run the football very well. I think their quarterback is a guy who isn't necessarily, he's a senior transfer, and so he's got some experience. And I don't think he's going to be like flustered under the pressure of the bright lights of playing at Ohio State on a Saturday night. So yeah, like I agree with you. I think it's a step up from Akron, and it's a game that I think is going to further test Ohio State while still giving them the opportunity to probably still win comfortably.
Yeah, like it's funny, man. Like I think Western Michigan in the MAC's probably a 7 or 8 win team, but they have some really intriguing things. One, you mentioned Hayden Wolf, who's a transfer from ODU. He's just kind of a steady Eddie at quarterback. Not necessarily the most special guy in the world, but a guy who, if left to his own devices, can certainly put some points on the board. You mentioned 14 points against the Wisconsin defense, but they got Buckley at running back. They've got some speed off the edges. And I think the strength of this team is the offensive line. And so I just think that's, I think it's a nicer test. I think Joe Moorhead's scheme kept Akron in things early in that game and gave Akron some opportunities here. I think the talent can keep you in there because, like, Ohio State does have their defensive line is better than Western Michigan's O-line. But on the interior, Western Michigan's got 2 guys who I think have a chance to play on Sundays, whether that's as a draft pick or just have to play their way in as an undrafted free agent. So you've got experience up front. You've got experience in your backfield. You do have some playmaking. I think Ohio State's still going to be fine, but it goes back to the idea of, in these first 4 weeks, Ohio State's biggest opponent is themselves and their own boredom or hubris. So this is a game that you should be able to keep these guys to less than 14 points or right around 14 points. But man, you just have to be very, very crisp. And like, you can't have the personal foul call that Ohio State had. I can't remember the safety that had it, but the hit on Ben Finley that knocked Ben Finley out of the game for a few minutes and brought Bullock in versus Akron. You can't have that in this game. You can't have a blown coverage with this kind of speed because they do have 1 or 2 guys that can't take it to the house, which is wild that we're saying that about Western Michigan. So, but I'll be honest with you. I think we naturally always go to how does their offense fare against our defense. I think the biggest tail of the tape in the game is it is your O-line versus their pass rush and their defense in general. They're replacing multiple starters up front on defense, including Marshawn Nealon, who's, I think, with the Cowboys now. I want to say Marshawn was a second-round pick this year. He was definitely a draft pick by the Cowboys. But so they're replacing their pass rush production. And last year, this team was dog bleep against the run. It was their Achilles heel. So if there is a team that's specifically in the
Well,
run
and
game,
that bore itself out in the Wisconsin game. I mean, they gave 215 yards rushing too, so there's an opportunity there.
I think there's a precedence there to say the offensive line should look better on the ground. And I thought Quinshon Judkins got jobbed last week. I don't think he got any help. Travion's just a naturally little bit more shifty, so yeah. Travion could kind of make hay. Quinshon needs better blocking up front if this tandem's going to be the 1-2 punch we think it is. So that's where I start. Like, all right, this is actually a worse defensive line than Akron had. It's probably the only place that Western Michigan is worse or lesser than Akron. I need to see the offensive line go out there and be some ass kickers and name takers because, like, this is it. This is the advantage, and here's the other thing. It's also just game 2. All right, let's see logical progression against a lesser opponent in the trenches on the offensive line side of things for Ohio State.
Well, and I think, too, we've heard a lot about what this offense is going to look like, what they're going to do to make Will Howard comfortable, and how they might lean on the run as their identity. And I've talked about this. There was a show I did, I think, one week when you were out, Nick, where I talked about, the one thing that they should be able to fall back on is the fact that they have two amazing, two of the top running backs in football on the same roster, and that when they really need a play, either of those guys should be able to make it for them. Yeah, you have Jeremiah Smith, you have others, but like to keep Will Howard kind of comfortable and take some pressure off of him, the fact that you have those two guys, I think, matters a lot. And to be able to sort of bank on them or rely on them in moments or key spots is good. And we've heard them say like they want to use the run game as a tool and a resource to set up the rest of the offense. So along those lines, like this feels like the game where if the offensive line can dominate, you can get that run game going. We can see this thing like in its full iteration in terms of, okay, what's the balance between run and pass? How is the run game and how is some of the screen game or short yardage stuff an extension of the run game? How are they utilizing these guys? And what does that mean for Will Howard being able to kind of take not a back seat, but like take a deep breath and be able to not have to worry so much about doing everything himself? And so like, I think this creates a really good opportunity for that to kind of play out and happen, and for them to take steps with what they want their run game to do and be, and all those different things this season. And I will say, like you mentioned, yes, they have some new faces on the defensive line, Western Michigan, but like one of the things that really catches my attention about their roster is the fact, like you said, that they are very upperclassmen laden. I think that matters in college sports more than anything. I mean, even in like March Madness in college basketball, a lot of times like the Kentuckys of the world, when Coach Cal was there and he's recruiting all like the one and done kids, those teams are oftentimes losing in the tournament to teams that have like seniors and juniors on them. And I think the same thing applies in football, where it's like if you get a team of players that have been around and been with each other for several years, and they kind of know, they have chemistry, they understand the system, they understand what the coaches are asking them to do, I think that stuff plays itself out and bears itself out in games against even superior teams like Ohio State. So yeah, like their offensive line, they have a couple guys that transferred in, but they're a senior and a grad transfer, and then they got three. Like they don't have a player on their offensive line that's not a senior. They have a lot of juniors and seniors across the offense in general. The only underclassman is Buckley, like you mentioned, their running back, and then the defensive side, like Corey Webb, their one defensive end is a freshman. But again, it's like a lot of juniors, a lot of senior transfers. There's some junior transfers in there. There's a grad transfer in there. So they really only have like two underclassmen in their top 22 guys, if you're including offense and defense, who are going to be, consistent starters for them. And I think that matters in terms of obviously giving Ohio State a little bit of a bigger test as well, because these guys, this isn't their first rodeo. They kind of know how to play together, and they have some experience playing against other good teams like we just saw last week in Wisconsin.
Well, and I think they have a lot of athleticism in the back seven, two solid linebackers, and really, like, they've got two standout corners and a safety. The kid's name is, I actually had to write this one down because the safety, Tate Halleck. So I don't know any of these. I don't know. I'll be honest with you. I don't know any of these dudes are true NFL players. Like maybe I feel about the offensive linemen, but I do think they're just really good, experienced college football players. And so it does set up this sets up to probably the best thing they do is defend the pass. they have a good enough pass rush that if you do not respect them, they can get home. But the opportunity's there in the ground game. So, it's one of those things where the most obvious course is, can we just run the ball down their throat and get them to submit? Because time of possession against a team like this, limiting opportunities for Hayden Wolf and Buckley and the young speed, you can kind of just suffocate them out. And I still think you can cover the spread. So,
yeah,
I think if it's going to be interesting to see, because we don't have a lot of frame of reference for Chip Kelly. It'll be interesting to see whether he leans into the obvious here, which is make them stop the run and then figure it out from there, or whether he still continues to say, we're a pass-first team and will accentuate the pass game with the run game. And again, there's my personal philosophy, which is when you're this talented, the more experience you can get on the ground, I think it's only going to build confidence for your offensive line. So I think that's how I think of things. That's just a philosophical thing.
I think there's some truth to that, though. Like, I just think that's I think that's an athlete mentality. Like, if you can build momentum, it's the same thing with, like, I keep using basketball references, but it's like you see the ball go in the hoop, and sometimes that's the thing that, like, triggers you to start shooting more, and you start knocking them down, and that gets you in rhythm. So I think it's the same sort of thing here. Like, if the offensive line can build some momentum from this game, get a forward push, help the run game really get going for the first time this season, I think that does kind of it spills over into the next week, right? It's a confidence booster that then hopefully means that this group can keep getting better and better as the season goes on.
Well, but I think you can beat them passing, and I think you can beat them running. And so,
well, I think you can beat them passing just based off of pure talent. Like, you just have the better wide receivers, probably the better quarterback, like, for sure. But I want this game to be like an experiment in a way where it's like, okay, I know that Ohio State has more talent, but can they, I don't want to say grind it out, because that kind of almost makes it sound like the game's going to be close. But, like, can they win with the run game? Can they win being more physical? That is the thing, to the point of what we talked about in the first segment with the offensive line struggles this year that we're kind of anticipating. Like, I kind of want that. I kind of welcome that. Like, can they win that style? And can they do that in a game like this? Because that's the thing that we're still we have questions about, right? So we want to see that. Like, we know that they should beat Western Michigan 10 times out of 10 by double figures or more. But I kind of want to see them get tested a little bit, where they have to use that run game a little bit more. Because, again, I think that goes back to the physicality thing too. Being the team that can run the football better, at the team that's run the football better in that Michigan matchup the last 3 years, or the last, I don't even know how many years, it's more than that, has won. And the last 3 years, Ohio State hasn't been able to do that. So I think all that stuff, like, it's little signs to me that this team's going to be different than the previous ones.
So I like the idea of, the test scenario. I just think it'll be a fascinating window into which route Chip Kelly chooses to beat them. I do think we need to, when we start talking about these games, we do need to start talking. Ohio State's 0-1 against the spread. It's a 37.5 point line, thanks to our friends at FanDuel as of this morning. Do you expect Western Michigan to have a chance to cover?
Yeah. I mean, I think because early season games are kind of fluky, like we saw last week. What'd you say? What is the spread?
37.5 points from FanDuel this morning.
Yeah, I think there's a good chance Western Michigan covers that. I do. I mean, they didn't cover this first week against Akron, and I think another week of momentum sort of under your belt, sure. But I just think Western Michigan's a better team, so they're going to keep it a little bit closer. I think they still win handily, but I'm going to say Western Michigan does cover the spread.
Yeah, this is kind of a sneaky game that in gambling parlance, I would say stay away from, because on one hand, Ohio State should cover the spread comfortably. On the other hand, Western Michigan's no bitch, and if you look at where Ohio State is, I think they are using these first few weeks as an extension of the preseason, which means they're not trying to step on their throat and blow them out by 70 points. So I probably would stay away from this game in general. I still think Ohio State's going to cover, But, man, I got to be honest with you, I'd be sitting there clenched for most of the game on Saturday. All right, guys, so we want to hear your thoughts on Western Michigan, whether you think this is a tougher matchup like I think both Spencer and I do. Where do you see Western Michigan's ability to push Ohio State, and whether or not Ohio State will win this game by 38 or more points? But when we come back, it's time for the Michigan Panic Meter with a huge game for the Wolverines, that school up north. That's next, right here. But first, a quick word from our sponsor. All right, guys, you know the show by now. It's time for the Michigan Panic Meter. Now, early in the season, there's no real reason to move the Michigan Panic Meter. You and I are both in the as gray as you could possibly be, which means zero panic. There's nothing we saw from Ohio State or Michigan week one that would change that, but Michigan does have a pretty significant matchup against Texas that I think is really fascinating, mostly because I don't know that Michigan's going to get enough out of quarterback if we're judging off week one to make it feel like they've got a chance to win this game. Texas is really good. Quinn Ewers, former Buckeye, Quinn Ewers is really good. It wouldn't surprise me if Texas won this game somewhat comfortably because between Warren and Orji, I mean, Alex Orji, who we all thought was going to be the starting quarterback, threw 2 passes in week one, did run the ball, I think, 8 times, something like that. But, like, I don't know. I don't know that you can beat Texas if you don't have a good passing game in 2024.
Yeah, I think that's probably pretty accurate. I mean, I'm anticipating Texas wins this game. I'm expecting it to be pretty handily too. When I say handily, I mean like double digits. Like I think they could get it like running away. And that's not trying to just, do the Michigan hate thing and all that. But I just don't know, like, offensively, if they have the firepower to keep up with Texas, who we know is, a fringe championship contender this year, if things kind of go their way. And obviously with Ewers playing quarterback, I also like one of my favorite storylines from this game, Nick, is the idea that Quinn Ewers obviously went to Ohio State very briefly at the beginning of his career. And that whole press conference he did back over the summer where he was asked about that game and he like wouldn't call them Michigan. He called them that team up north. Like the fact that there's still some, I don't want to say bad blood or anything because he didn't really get a chance to experience all that. But the idea that like he still, lets his brief stint at Ohio State sort of shine through and he's not going to refer to them by name and all that. Like I kind of like that as an extra wrinkle of a narrative into this game. So yeah, like I think Texas should win this one pretty handily. And I'm excited to see if Quinn Ewers has some sort of flex plan for afterwards.
Let's be honest about this. It's phony. Quinn Ewers.
It is phony, but I'm never going to miss a chance for somebody else to shit on Michigan is my point. I don't care if it's phony or not.
Quinn Ewers got paid to go to Ohio State, ball Ohio State girls, and basically just sit.
Is that why you're upset? You're upset that he stole some of our fine Ohio women? Is what you're upset about?
No, it's the fact that the man got the best life anyone could have. He didn't have to play football. He got to act like a football. He got to reap the rewards.
He got to
of a
act
football
like
player,
a football,
financially and sexually. And I'm just like, you know what, Quinn? Just because you've been inside another Buckeye doesn't mean you truly know what this rivalry is. And I'm sorry, somebody has to say it.
Just because you've been I mean, listen, I'm not saying he understands what the rivalry is. I'm just saying if it comes down to Quinn Ewers, who got a chance to bone some of our fine Ohio women, as we alluded to, and barely dipped his toe in the water on the Ohio State experience, or Michigan, I'm going to be okay with Quinn Ewers beating Michigan.
All right. So if you're a farmer and a city boy comes into town and he stays at your house, he eats your food, he kind of helps around the farm but doesn't run the farm, and he balls your daughter. You thinking that guy's a farmer? Or you think that's some carpetbagger come to take a piece of what he doesn't own? I'm
not saying that I'm like the biggest Quinn Ewers fan ever. All I'm saying is this week, I'm the biggest Quinn Ewers fan ever because he's playing Michigan. If the alternative is, I'm trying to think of something for your farmer scenario. I don't really know how that would work. But if
that gets people shot, that scenario gets people shot. That's all I'm saying. As a dazzling urbanite like myself, I just
don't think, like, if the alternative is rooting for Michigan to beat Quinn Ewers, I'm just not going to do it. So I'm fine with Quinn Ewers in his half-hearted efforts of being a Buckeye, beating Michigan for 1 week, and then I can go back to being like, yeah, he just faked his way through it. He's a Texas guy through and through. Texas forever, or whatever the hell they say down there. Is that a thing? I think that was the thing on Friday Night Lights. That's why I said it.
Oh, okay. But no, the big thing here, by the way, is this game is a 7.5 point game. I very rarely will I ever say this. This feels like a game where you lay those 7.5 points, no matter that it's in Michigan or not. And because here's the thing, I think for Michigan, if Michigan keeps it close or wins this game, we all of a sudden have to recalibrate Ohio State, Michigan at the end of this season.
And the Michigan panic meter.
And, but also, if Texas wins and they win considerably, I think it confirms the suspicion that Texas is as good as Texas has been in a while. So I do think there are real stakes here for Ohio State fans because on one hand, if Michigan gets blown out, it's going to make you feel better about that game in November. Whereas if Texas does the blowing out, you're going to be looking at this and going, damn, that's another team we're going to have to go through in late December and January to try and win a national championship.
Quinn Ewers did a lot of blowing out at Ohio State. That's all I know, according to Nick Wilson.
I think we come back to the idea. There are things that Nick Wilson says. You are the wholesome one.
All I said was blowing out. That is not even that graphic.
Opie from Mayberry doesn't talk about blowing out backs, okay? He says, gee, Pa, where'd the kinfolk go? And the truth is, the kinfolk went around the bushes to blow somebody's back out. But that's Andy can't say that. Opie can't say that. I don't think Gomer can say that. You know who can say that? Aunt B.
So you
can't tell me Aunt B was a little filthy.
So we now need to start a new graphic of just a list of things that apparently I'm not allowed to say on the show. Is that
I'm not for censorship. I'm just saying it's not on brand for you to talk about blowing out backs.
All I said was blowing out. That was
I
didn't say the T word. I didn't even utter the T word.
You dropped one word from that. You walked right up to the line. You put one toe across and expected me not to say that toe's across the line. Thank you very much. Speaking of toes going across the line.
Lines are meant to be crossed. That's all I know.
No more dancing for Ohio State in the pregame. The TikTok dance-a-thon before games. At least was absent before the Akron game. Oh, are you suddenly going to go Tommy Truck Nuts on this?
Well, I just think the reason I say good is because it was like the easy, like you want to talk about low-hanging fruit. We know Ryan Day is already low-hanging fruit. But the second they lose a game or if they lose to Oregon in a couple weeks, I hate that it became like the easy thing to point to where it was just like, well, maybe if the players weren't dancing before the game, they would have won this game. You know what I mean? Like that's always the thing.
Bring it back to South Park voice?
Yeah. I get,
well, maybe if these players weren't dancing before the game.
I can't believe these players took hors d'oeuvres. Yeah,
they took their dance.
No, but that just became the easy thing to grasp at for fans of like, oh, these players today, they don't understand the rivalry. They don't understand playing at Ohio State. They're busy doing their TikTok Insta-face dances before the game starts, and it's just so immature and stupid and blah blah blah. So just get rid of it. Don't make it a thing whatsoever. And go out there and whip people's ass and prove to everybody that – I mean, because in the end, at the end of this, like, I don't really care from my perspective because if that's what the players want to do and it's like a fun team building sort of thing for them, fine, whatever. I never use that as a reason why I was worried about Ohio State losing to Michigan, but I know that that's what other people are going to say in this fan base.
Yeah, then I don't think they should get rid of it. Unless you think because here's the thing. I think dancing.
You think this is Ryan Day caving to fan pressure and being a bitch, basically?
Oh, I'll get to it. That's not the words I would use. I think that dancing on TikTok is the dumbest thing in society. I say that as a 38-year-old man who doesn't like to dance. All right, unless I'm drunk. But like the reality is, I kind of thought it was dumb anyways. But my personal point is, it's just an easy win. All it is an easy thing that has no substance to it. So if Ryan Day is looking at this going, well, we're going to stop doing the pregame dancing stuff on TikTok because I'm sick of hearing about it. That's honestly, it's a smart move to say, I'm just going to cancel it because it doesn't do us any good. At the same point, people acting like that's why you lost 3 straight games to Michigan. I didn't see a lot of the fatties out there. I didn't see a lot of your offensive linemen who can't block the broad side of a barn. I didn't see them out there pop lock and dropping it. So your problem is that you're not tough enough, strong enough, physical enough, mean enough in the trenches. That's why you've lost to Michigan the last 3 years. Not because of TikTok dancing, but it's old people yelling. Listen, I should be one of the old people yelling at the clouds. How dare you dance? It's Ohio State. You should no smiles on the football field. It's a man's game.
0 fun, sir.
Literally, I should be of that ilk. And all I think is when people say, well, TikTok dancing. Okay, just tell us you're an old miserable bastard.
See, but
all right, because it doesn't matter. Yeah. It's not why teams win and lose. It's not why Ohio State's team is soft. There are other reasons why they're soft.
So I see. I'm with you on the fact that it's not that big of a deal in the grand scheme of things. But you also
flip flopping.
No. I'm still sticking by what I said. The reason I think it still is the right thing to do. To your point is it is an easy win. It's an easy win.
Who gives a shit?
It's an easy win for Ryan Day to get in the good graces. Not even Ryan Day, just the team to get in the good graces of the fans, and it won't be a distraction anymore. And I also do think too,
mouth breathers
from a PR standpoint, you can sell that as oh, we're all about our business this year. That's what it becomes, and I think that is an easy win. And I'm okay taking the easy win in this instance.
If Ohio State had won the last 3 games, Michigan game the last 3 years, and if they had won a national championship in Ryan Day's second year. Anybody give a shit about TikTok dances?
Probably not, no. But here we are.
I objectively think the act is dumb. But if we're getting to the point, because here's the thing. In the end, if you're placating to people who bitch on social media or because a booster doesn't like it, then the idiots are winning. We have to stop placating idiots in this world. It's okay. I'll be honest, when people in my life do things that are stupid, well, you've worked with me, I'll call it out. Because as a friend, as a father figure, it is my job as an elder statesman to go, don't placate to idiots. Because the whole world is placating to morons. We got 12 tweets here. One of them from Jugs McGee, XXX. And he says, this is why we haven't beat Michigan. Let's placate to Jugs McGee XXX because God knows that one dipshit on social media, that's the difference between us and winning. No, stop placating to morons. This isn't that hard. And you know what? And here's the thing. You've triggered me, and it's not your doing. Spencer, this is not your fault. I'm now going full Will Howard. Spencer, this is not your fault. I'm not yelling at you. No, but we've gotten in this era where these PR jagoffs tell everybody, well, I know how to make people happy here. Your job is not to make people happy. Your job is to win football games. It's that simple. If you were 21-57, your ass would be back in Vermont canning maple syrup right now. No, you're Ryan friggin' Day. You've got single-digit losses. Don't placate to morons. I see teams do it all the time. The Cleveland Browns, they can't eke out a wet fart without spinning it in some way from the PR perspective because we've got to control the message. No, jackass, it's impossible. Stop worrying about the messaging. It is majoring in the minor. Worry about why your offensive line cannot block for shit. Then, when you figure that out, we'll talk about TikTok dancing.
I think sometimes it's okay to take the easy win. Nick.
I blacked out. Where are we?
That's where I'm at with it. I just think sometimes it's easy to take I think it's fine to take the easy win.
Who are you? Where am I? I don't know.
Here's the other thing. You have Michigan players who were actively making fun of it too.
Oh no!
Alex Orji was poking fun at it and all this different stuff. I just
2 passes, Alex Orji.
I just think, Nick, sometimes it's okay to take the easy win. I don't have a problem with it. I don't. I'm not using that as a reason why they lost to Michigan or anything like that. I think those people are idiots too. But I think sometimes it's okay to just take the easy win, spin it how you're going to spin it. And also, we don't know the context of who decided this. Like, I'm assuming it's a Ryan Day thing, but maybe the players all said like, nah, man, like we don't care if we do it or not. Like, I don't know for sure, but I'm just saying, who knows? Maybe they felt, hey, we don't think we want to prove that we're like it's a different Ohio State team. We're about our business this year. So the TikTok dance stuff, we don't need it in our pregame routines. How do we know that didn't happen? Or that wasn't part of the conversation? I'm just saying.
Yeah. They've also given up premarital sex. And players have also said, you guys have paid us too much money.
Well, at BYU they do. So
not people, no, they don't. They just don't get caught. They get really good at keeping it on the DL, or they soak.
Caught.
Or they soak, which is a whole nother thing. Don't look into that, people. But no, yeah, the players are like, you know what? We didn't beat Michigan last year. We didn't win a national championship. Please take 50% of our NIL money back.
But also, why can't
and by the way,
why can't that be something that's like earned though? Like, why can't that be?
No sex, no booze. We're not partying. We're all ball. We're about ball.
Why?
And no more dancing.
But why can't that also be something that's like you earn that? You know, because coaches used to do that. Like when I was in high school and I played, and when it was football or other sports, like it would always be like, hey, if we go out, we take care of business this weekend. You guys, like we'll end practice. Like they do like little things like that. Like why can't it be something where it's like, listen, if you want to bring the TikTok dances back, go beat Michigan this year. Like I'm okay with that being like a sort. I'm just saying. I don't think it's the end of the world that they got rid of it. I think the fact that you blacked out over an argument over TikTok dancing, even though you don't even care about TikTok dances that much and players doing them pregame, is sort of even as dumb as the people who are saying that it's the reason they lost to Michigan, if we're being honest.
All right, guys, hands in.
I don't know why you've planted your flag so hard on this.
Beat Michigan for TikTok on 3. 1, 2, 3. Beat Michigan for TikTok. We want to dance again. Cue the careless whisperer. We're never going to dance again, you surly bitches. Well, that's kind of the end of the show. Not forever, just for this episode. Send in your predictions on 92 Through the Fans YouTube channel. You can comment on the stories. We want to hear what your predictions are for this Western Michigan game. Whether you yourself would have placated to the 12 dipshits on Twitter that dancing on TikTok is why Ohio State football has fallen by the wayside under Ryan Day. Also, follow the show wherever you get your podcast.
I think we need to start a TikTok channel where it's just Nick dancing after Ohio State wins.
No, it's going to be before wins. All right, we're going to do one of these, one of these, huh? This
Nick,
ain't Texas.
Yeah, this is a good idea. I actually really like this. A TikTok for Sons of the Shoe where it's just Nick dancing pregame to fill the void in his heart from the missing Ohio State TikTok dances pregame.
Fat guys dancing always works.
When they put those guys on the scoreboard at football at sporting events. So yeah.
But follow Sons of the Shoe wherever you get your podcast. Apple, Spotify, 92throughthefan.com, the free Odyssey app. Have I mentioned Apple? We'll be back this weekend. Spencer's actually going to have the post game because I have a familial obligation I cannot get out of. But of course, I'll be back next week as we get you ready for the Marshall game. Spencer, great stuff today, but please, no dancing on the way out. This is a serious podcast.
Well, considering that I'm okay with getting rid of the pregame dancing, I will not be dancing on my way out.
So help me God, if you dance even one bit as we get out of this show, this podcast is over.
I'll save the dancing for beating Michigan and hopefully winning a national championship. Maybe Oregon is worthy of dancing if they win that game. We'll see.
Boo. Go Bucks.
Go Bucks.